special introduction for Dulce.
Mic check, mic check. Day 2. How's everyone doing? We good? Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this conversation. So we just had a panel of some excellent Bitcoin open source contributors. We had from Lisa, Gloria, Davidson, and Bruno, and they went into depth about what it really means to be an open source contributor. We're gonna take a little step back and think about how do people actually take the path and how do people actually get into open source Bitcoin development, design, product management, and talk about the funding aspect of this ecosystem. So we have some very important people in the space, some very talented people in the space. So what I want to start with is I want to go very high level to start with. So Lucas, can you explain what open source is and why it's important in the context of Bitcoin, and then we'll speak specifically about what you guys are doing individually. Yeah?
Sure. So open source is not new. It's not new. It didn't come with Bitcoin. It's an old way of producing software, and it's a better way of producing software because it's open. It's widely available and people can check the code, especially when in situations where people need to trust that code for something that is important, like money, like Bitcoin is. Like not trusting the code and being able to verify that the code does what it says it does, it's really important. So in the context of Bitcoin, Bitcoin the way it is right now, I like to say, people tend to say that Bitcoin is inevitable. I agree, but Bitcoin is inevitable because of us, because we're gonna be here to fight for Bitcoin. And for us to fight for Bitcoin, we need open source developers because the software is not ready for mass adoption for billions. We need more software, we need more designers, we need more developers, we need more product managers and more people building on Bitcoin. And that's why initiatives like ours, like the things we're doing, the people, the Dulce, Femi, me, you, they're really important for Bitcoin to continue to be developed and improved.
Awesome. So what you're saying is anyone in this room, anyone in this conference can get involved. They can view the source code. They can, download an open source wallet on their phone, and they can go and if they have the capabilities, they can go and look at the code. If they don't have the capabilities to do it themselves, maybe they trust a friend who can go and verify what is going on. All right, that's fantastic. And how does that differ from traditional working world software? How is it different?
I believe Dulce had some major experience before in the industry, so maybe she has an even better answer for that.
Bom dia. Eu quero decir primeiro que open source is something beautiful, it's kind of a gift for humanity in the same way of Bitcoin. And like Lucas said, everybody can contribute to open source, but the difference between open source and closed source is, first of all, is for humanity, is for us. But as a developer, and I work as a developer in my past life, you can go check the code and even do a review. In Libreria de Satoshi, for example, we train people from all professions. It's like a university for Bitcoin for 3 months. It's very, very hard. You learn run a node, decode transaction, self-custody and everything. But it's not only for developers. And the reason I do this in Libreria de Satoshi is because anyone can become a developer. I believe coding is like writing and reading centuries ago. People in the monarchy, they said, no, reading is only for the aristocrats. And developing is you need to be an engineer. Actually, no, you don't need to be an engineer. I am an economist, and I work as a developer in Silicon Valley, just to give you an idea. And this is the beauty of open source. If you are not an engineer, you can read the code, you can understand the code. You go to GitHub, Bitcoin, GitHub is Bitcoin and GitHub, and you can see the issues. Somebody posts in Twitter, hey, why they don't accept the mempool proposal I did? And then you go there, and then it's like, dude, the tests are not passed or didn't pass the test. And you can see all the discussion. I think one is the beauty thing versus in our company. This is one part. The other part is every project, let's say Bitcoin Core has rules to contribute. It's like every project like that is open source tells you the rules to contribute. In Bitcoin Core are very specifically, while maybe in Cashew is very different. And then you have to learn these rules. And in a company, you have a manager who tell you, hey, you have to do A, B, C. And then as a developer, this translates in the way we use branches, how we rebase, how we do all these things, but you learn. And I'll give you an example. We have in V4OS our developer residency now. We learn all these things, but the person who, open source is so open, and our projects are so open that the person who win a code challenge was a junior developer. It was a women junior developer who kind of break the window to get into the residency for senior developer, and yesterday she was the one who reviewed Bitcoin Core. It is open source, it's open for everyone, and I think that's what I wanted to say, basically.
It also, just to add something, it also opens up the possibilities for even more innovation, because like Cashew was mentioned, look how fast Cashew as a protocol developed, because there are so many wallets, and then they're all open source. So if someone wants to start a new Cashew wallet, they don't need to start from scratch. They just can take another existing Cashew wallet and like, hey, I want this Cashew wallet to have this feature. It doesn't have, so I will add it. And it just develops faster and faster. While in the industry, it's just closed. And then companies are competing, but they're not improving from and borrowing from each other.
All right, some great explanations there. So there are real human beings behind this, with real disciplines, real craftsmanship, real skill sets. How do we ensure that we keep a strong pipeline of people coming and working into the space? How about we go with Femi, and you talk a bit about what you're doing over at the Human Rights Foundation and the Bitcoin Development Fund over there. What are you guys doing to contribute to helping maintain a strong pipeline of developers?
Thank you so much. Maybe I'll go even a step before that. So I think Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever that person is, did the world a favor. Building technology, money technology for the whole world, openly, giving it to a community, and walking away. And intentionally giving it to a community so that no single individual, no single company can lay claim to this is mine, which is what you find in the industry with intellectual property, IP, and closed source code. And has given us this technology now as money that the whole world can use. And of course, it requires that we continue to maintain that infrastructure. The challenge we have is that open source is great, but open source is not the coding culture in a huge chunk of the world, in the majority of the world. I'm from Nigeria. If you're from what they call developing countries or global majority countries, when you spend a long time going to university to learn the skills of becoming a software engineer, you have a family that is waiting for you to get the best job you can get in the best company that's paying you the highest salary so that you can take care of the rest of the family. It's a step up. Now, telling those people to go work and contribute to an open source project for free is not practical and doesn't match the incentives. But at the same time, if the people who are building and contributing to Bitcoin only represents the point of view of one part of the world, then how are we sure that the technology that they're building will work in every part of the world? And so there's work that needs to happen to bring people from those parts of the world that will probably not ordinarily choose to contribute to the project, to give them a pathway to come and contribute to the project. And so I got into Bitcoin, it's now almost 3 years ago, to work on a project that was going to get developers from Africa into Bitcoin development. Because we need to decentralize, just as Bitcoin is decentralized technology, we need to decentralize the pool of people working on Bitcoin so that it's representative of the whole world. We need more women in the space. We need more Africans in the space, more Asians in the space, more Latinos in the space,
Brasileiros in the space.
more Brazilians in the space. And that's the work that we've been doing for the last 2 years. I've been involved in for the last 2 years and a half. I transitioned into the role at the Human Rights Foundation a few months ago to work on the Bitcoin Development Fund. But one key part of that mandate still exists, and that is how do we create incentives for people from developing countries to actually come work in Bitcoin? One part of that is how do we give them programs like our own that teach them, that guide them in understanding the culture and the dynamics of working in open source, but can also pay them a living wage and help them build a career that is viable, so that when they compare themselves to their mates who've taken that path of working in the corporate, they don't feel like they wasted years of their lives working on this. And that's the work we do. So we fund, we train, we find the developers, we introduce them to Bitcoin engineering, we introduce them to open source Bitcoin engineering, we give them grants as small as possible and help them scale and build what looks like a viable career, but with different stages. So at different stages, if they need mentors, they can find people who are further down the journey than them, who can help them figure out the next part in their development. Because on the one hand, it's important that we're working and improving Bitcoin and making sure Bitcoin works. But we also have to care about the human beings that we're inviting into this space to work on Bitcoin, because their own interests, their own lives matter too. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I want to say something. First of all, congratulate Lucas for all the effort with SatsConf and Ventium. And Ventium is doing like education, and now grants are now education, and I was doing education and now grants. Like we kind of are peers. He's doing Portuguese Latam and Spanish Latam. And I think one problem we realized, Luke and I, is like, hey, there is no people like us, people from Latam. And one thing is happened is like, we keep bleeding as Latin America, and our talent is moving from Latam to New York or to United States. And I think in our case, we launched B4OS, Bitcoin for OS is a program for senior developers, but also to give micro grants. We realized something like OpenSats. I'm going to mention some places where you can find grants. Is HRF, OpenSats, Ventium, Bitcoin for Open Source, HRF, OKX. All these places sometimes need you to be full-time contributor. And if you are a person, and Spiral, sorry, this guy is here, Spiral. But you need to be full-time contributor. And one thing I noticed, if you are a father or mother in Latam, you cannot quit your job and be full-time contributor. While an American guy who bought Bitcoin in the beginning, he can quit his job and be full-time in Bitcoin. And also, like our people is being kind of traumatized for the history of Africa, Asia, and Latam. Then we need to give more positive incentive faster. Like sometimes the organizations that give grants, they are not in the place where we are. Then we need to respond faster with maybe micro grants or like allocate people. And I think this is the reason. Like Lucas and I, we are just normal persons. Like we didn't get any special networking or any talent. It was just Bitcoiners who decided to start Ventium, for my side, Libre Satoshi and B4OS, to help our communities. And then you can talk with us to try to replicate what we are doing in your communities, because we need more people.
And that's the beauty of open source again. And like that's the beauty of building on Bitcoin, because we're all here and we all have organizations giving grants to Bitcoin developers. We all have organizations educating Bitcoin developers, but we are not competitors. We're always collaborating, actually. And even our educational efforts and our educational material and our educational programs, they're also open source. Like when I started designing the Bitcoin developer launchpad with Adil and Bruno for Vincian, we borrowed from all over. Like we borrowed from Bitrus, we borrowed from Bichala, we borrowed from Liberty and B4OS, we borrowed from Chaincode. Like there's so many programs and educational programs and educational material, and we borrowed from Antonopoulos and his awesome books and George and Kali.
We help each other.
Yeah,
It's like
we are always collaborating and borrowing from each other. And like someone does a great program, Chaincode does a great program, and then we go and replicate that program. And while we're replicating, we realize, oh, there's something missing here. Let's add it. Let's change the dynamic a little bit here. And then Chaincode might like, oh, I like what you did there. I'm gonna borrow back. And then Bitrust does something else, and then I'm gonna borrow too. And then it's always the pollination between the programs and the grant givers. It's awesome, and we're always collaborating.
Awesome. I hope you can feel the love in the room, right? There's so much love in this spread. But let's get into some more practical stuff. So like I'm a Brazilian developer, and you know, I just learned about Bitcoin, and there's now a Bitcoin president apparently. Bitcoin is now all-time highs. You know, I learned about this sound money concept. I'm orange pilled. I have strong software engineering, design, product management skills. Like, what advice would you give that person to start getting involved and make a sustainable living for yourself? Maybe we'll start with Femi, and then we'll work our way across.
So I'd say the first thing you should try and do is first understand yourself. If you're the kind of person who likes to learn in community, find a group, and there are lots of them. Discord groups are organizations where you can find other people that you can do this journey with, because it can be lonely, and you may be exposed to culture of programming like we saw in the previous panel. That's very different from what you're used to. If you're someone who likes to learn on your own, there are resources that you can tap into. Chaincode has lots of resources.
They gather a lot of resources.
Base 58 has lots of resources. If you want a program that's cohort-based, you can find organizations globally, locally that you can sign up with. And then find projects. I know we talked about a lot in the previous panel about Bitcoin, Core, and Lightning. But there are way more projects in the space than those two. And it's important to know what programming languages am I familiar with, and how can I find projects within the space that match the languages that I'm familiar with. Don't feel you have to start at Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core can be an intimidating place to start. So find a different project. If you're a front-end engineer, there are tons of layer 2 tooling projects, application wallet projects that are open source that you can go start building proof of work in, because it helps to understand the culture of the project you want to contribute to and start to build a track record of contributions and learning in the space. And if I may add, before I hand over, when it then comes to when you're thinking about resourcing, and this is something that I will particularly emphasize here, and will do in Africa. Now I've moved from the educator side to the grant giver side. And one thing I've seen that is very important to point out is apply for funding.
Yeah.
Do not feel that you have to be at the peak level in the space to apply for funding. We say something, we say for the grace of the confidence of a white heterosexual male from the West. With the least level of qualification, they would apply for stuff. Where an African, a Latino, a woman would second guess themselves and not put themselves forward. they would put themselves forward, and it's who puts himself forward. Where I'm from in Nigeria, we say it's the child that raises his hands that you carry. So if there's one thing I'll leave behind is apply even before you think you're ready. Yes, you will get rejections. You will get rejections because there's work that we are doing that we need to do to keep educating the funders that they cannot evaluate developers from every part of the world in the same way. But that work is happening, and there's more funding that's coming in at the base level that can grow with you as you grow in your career.
Yeah.
But you will not get it if you're not applying, if you're not putting yourself out there.
And I want to add something, like let's say you apply in December, or right after SatsConf you apply, you put the PR, your work, you can reapply in 6 months and say, after the last time you told me no, this is what I did. Like in Bitcoin, proof of work is religion. Like like if you go and do your proof of work as a developer, and like they mentioned, you don't have to always use merge and do pull requests. You can do a bunch of reviews. You can explain replicate box, kind of being support for a project. And there are so many and I would say like nowadays, if you are a developer and you want to see how is the space, I am not into social media, but I'm gonna recommend use Nostr, because a lot of the developers, or most of the developers are there, and you can start finding spaces. And like, you don't be shy and follow Lucas or myself or Femi in Twitter. I'm gonna answer like after 2 or 3 days, but I'm gonna answer.
Yeah, and in terms of more practical or objective tips or suggestions of things you could do, agree. Before I do that, agree, like apply. Like even the application itself, even if you get a rejection, it will be a learning opportunity. Sometimes maybe the application will have an interview, for example, and now you know the interviewer, you know the person who decides, and now he knows you exist, and then he'll continue following what you're doing, and that's already something you established. But yeah.
I want to mention a story of one of my students. I'm not gonna dox it, but he was not a developer when he started. He started like at 29 years old, starting with the basic course at Libreria Satoshi. And because we have such a big funnel, we can know the people. He did all the courses, like even the seminars for Bolt and everything. After 2 years, he's with us for 2 years, almost 2 years and a half. He made it to the senior developer residency. He is not senior, but he was the only two. There is 2 junior developers. He did the PRs. He's contributed to Femi, and now he's one of the probably candidates to get a grant. And he started his career and learning programming and learning Bitcoin from Bitcoin one-on-one 3 years ago in Libreria. Like, there is stories of success.
That's amazing.
That you can see, you can learn, and you don't have to be a Bitcoin core developer. You can just be a normal person and be a contributor.
Yeah, and then going into the practical suggestions that Conor asks. Okay, if you're in São Paulo, every last Thursday of the month, we have São Paulo BitDevs at Casa 21. And by the way, Casa 21 is actually open every day. Just tell me you want to go there, and we'll have developers working maybe in open source projects or maybe in Bitcoin applications and companies. So go to Casa 21. You're not in São Paulo, we're also supporting BitDevs in Florianópolis, Brasilia, Porto Alegre, Belo Horizonte. And if you're not in any of these cities, come to one of them, learn about BitDevs, learn about the format, and start yours in your city. We'll support it. We'll pay for the pizzas, we'll pay for the drinks, and pay for the venue. And if right now we're currently starting the cohort for Bitcoin Developer Launchpad, we had 680 applications, and now 110 went to the no. The claps are for the student that got 2 years after 2 years. The claps should be for him. So what was I saying? Okay, the developer launchpad is starting now. So the next one is going to be probably like by mid next year. But while you wait for the next cohort, you can also go through some of the seminars we'll do while we're doing the cohorts. Also, in February, there is an opportunity for you to go. I think it's February. If someone is here and I'm wrong, confirm. In February in Florianopolis, Lisa Nygut, who was here before, she's organizing Bitcoin Plus Plus, which is a developer conference, Bitcoin developer conference. It's a great opportunity for you to go and hack with other developers. It's totally focusing on developing and coding on Bitcoin. And then another tip is, what was the other tip I had? Okay, I forgot. But the other thing I had is, if you don't like me, if you don't like my organization, it doesn't matter, because you can apply for Liberia's cohort and she will accept it. Maybe you're gonna need to like chat with others in Spanish, but then maybe you...
We have Brazilian people in our cohorts.
Yeah.
Like we have at least 5
because they hate
Brazilian
me,
people.
right?
No, like...
and then if you want to speak English, Bichala also has great programs. And they accept people from all over, and they speak English in their cohorts. So you find some, and if you don't like any of them, start yours. The programs and the materials are all open source. Start yours, apply for funding, do yours, collaborate with the other
Here's
organizations.
the guy who can help you.
And just to point out, these programs are not supposed to be gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Do not ever let anyone gatekeep you in this space. The beauty of open source is that you can go on GitHub and join the project. The kind of people I like the most are the people that are rejected for the program and that go on their own, and 1 year later you see them and they've excelled beyond the people who went in the program. So do not let anyone gatekeep you from getting access to the knowledge. The beauty of open source is it's free and it's accessible to everyone.
One thing.
Just a minute. Right now, we have at least 5 developers working full-time in open source in Brazil. But only 3 of them are Vinci grantees. In this case, because we didn't have enough budget for them, but if it wasn't the case, maybe they didn't like us or we didn't like them, they could apply for Spire, they could apply for HRF, they could apply for B4OS. It doesn't matter. We're not gatekeepers of Bitcoin in Brazil. We're just supporting Bitcoin in Brazil. But other organizations can exist either here or elsewhere.
I want to close my participation with this. Bitcoin, being a Bitcoin developer, I hope and I wish, I think it's going to be a prestigious career in Latin America. Why? Because if we get a salary from New York or like USA and we can live in Floripa or in Mexico or in Buenos Aires or pushing cheap power, like we get more money and more quality of life. I even think a lot of the Americans and European people are gonna decide to move to our countries. First, we are amazing. We have sun, beautiful food. Then it's prestigious because you can work in your own hours. It's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but you can work in your own hours. You don't have a boss, and you can have an American salary. For us, it's a prestigious career, and I will invite you to start reviewing your favorite project, check it out, and be part of this movement because it's a movement.
Yeah, and just to finish, I was going to say, let's look into the future a little bit, maybe 5 to 10 years. I want to hear from each of you, maybe just 30 seconds each. We're trying to build an army, of skilled people to really, because like you said earlier on in the conversation, it really is it's a team effort, it's a global effort. What does the future look like in the next 5 to 10 years for open source training, open source funding? Are we going to get it part of like the national school curriculum? Are the government going to start funding developers in Brazil to work on Bitcoin Core? Like, let's think out of the box a little bit here and see, like, what do you think is going to happen in the next
I don't know about government, but we will infiltrate anyway. We have a deal at the University of Brasilia. We have Ella at Cornell. Like, we will infiltrate. It doesn't matter. And in terms of like, I lived through, Vinci exists now for maybe almost 3 or 2.5 maybe. Yeah. I don't remember. It was before SatsConf, first SatsConf, so August 2022. Okay, so we exist, but even before that, our first grantee was Bruno, but we were supporting Bruno's path for maybe 1.5 years until we actually got funding for Vinci to exist. Before that, we helped him get hooked with Brink for a part-time grant while he was working at another company. And then throughout this process, and even before that, I was following the space, the funding space. And we lived through eras where some very prominent and long-time contributors to Bitcoin were like desperately looking for funding, and they were not finding. Now we are in an opposite situation, sort of, because we have more funding than we have developers, and that's when and it's not like by chance that now we have so many educational programs. It's because we need developers working on Bitcoin. We have money to pay them. We just don't have the talent yet, but we're training them and creating this talent. And the idea is, I don't know about the future in terms of funding, so I try to be conservative there, but I'll at the same time optimistic.
Awesome. I'm going to have to cut us short because I got told off for going overtime yesterday. But can we just give a round of applause to the panelists?
Can I just say something for the text?
Last 20 seconds.
I have a keynote later today which talks about the role that I see that developers and people from the global south have in how Bitcoin scales. And it answers some of the questions around what I see in the future. Fiat just started Nossas here in Brazil. We need big open source projects coming out of the global majority countries. We are the ones that are going to help Bitcoin scale, not the guys in the global.
I want to be clear. Bitcoin software development, training, education has to follow philosophy of Bitcoin. It has to be decentralized. We are helping our students to create schools in Cuba, Venezuela, Argentina. They go to the university, but we don't hold any monopoly. It's against the philosophy of Bitcoin. It has to be decentralized. This is how the future is going to look like.
Awesome. Great way to finish. All right. Thank you, guys.